back now as political activities gradually gather momentum ahead of the 2027 general elections. An old controversy has once again found its way into the national conversation: the academic records and certificate of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The issue, which featured prominently during the 2023 election cycle, has resurfaced following renewed political and legal debates, with supporters maintaining that the matter has been settled by the courts, while critics insist questions of transparency and accountability remain.
So beyond politics, the renewed debate raises broader questions about electoral integrity, candidate qualification, the role of the judiciary, and whether issues from previous elections should continue to shape Nigeria's political discourse as preparations for 2027 are in top gear. Joining us for this conversation is we are expecting the Director of Schools and Social Politics Thoughts, that's Dr. Sam Amadi. But for now, we have the Executive Director, Electoral College Nigeria, Kunle Lawal. Mr. Kunle Lawal, you are welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Kunle, yet again, as we approach another election, we have this matter on the table. Everybody's talking about the president's qualifications. Last I checked, however, to run this country, you don't need anything more than a school certificate. So why is this all of a sudden relevant all over again?
It's funny for me because when of course we started we moved to this particular Fourth Republic, I was expecting, a new sunrise for democracy and not things like this, which are supposed to be dealt with a long time. It's a pre-election matter. As regards this, I think why it surfaced again is that someone instituted a case, I think in June, in Kano, if I'm right, to say that the president should not be allowed to run in 2027 elections now because of his qualifications. Now, we must be clear on this and very, very clear on this. In 2022, preceding to his 2023 race, all these cases were cleared. And, even the United States, the courts clearly stated that there should be a discovery. Now, most people will educate this to mean that it means there was a forgery. There wasn't a forgery. It was Chicago State University being asked to present the certificates of the president or provide the certificates of the president to the president. So that's the present issue. But I think where we have a quagmire within things is that politically in Nigeria, I would say we're emotional. And then secondly, institutional basis isn't that strong. We don't have a strong set of institutions because I think by now INEC should have a verification system for certificates. This goes to say the supporters of the present president, yes, it means his university has been cleared, which was what he submitted in 2023, and now 2027 has been cleared. But it also does not mean that other certificates have been verified. Mm-hmm. And to people who are in the opposition, it also states that because there was a court in the US advocating, saying that there should be a discovery on the certificates, doesn't mean he forged them. Mm. So it's kind of like, most people trying to more or less act like there's depending on what you're supporting, we're kind of caught within the crossfire between both sides. Mm. But I would like to add this, that if INEC had a proper certificate verification system, which we should have had in place because of that particular clause, which I think Section 137 or so, which states that we require at least a certificate. So we all know that you can't go to university without a WAEC certificate or a WAEC result. So this should all have been cleared. I feel it's a failure of institutional operation by INEC.
Mm. One more thing. You mentioned the Chicago State University. They actually confirmed that the president did attend the university and that he graduated in 1979, if I'm not mistaken. Shouldn't that be enough to have this matter not reoccur again? For me, it's the fact that it's been attended to. It continues being attended to each time it comes up, which is each time we're heading to an election. So, why are we continuing to give this relevance?
I think we've gathered something that we inherited from the military junta, It is always attack, 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 whoever is president. This is not Sam. The thing is that we forget when democracy, things which are relevant, we should be having conversations on, like, has President delivered on his promise? Yes or no. The situation of Nigeria, is it better before he took over, and is it no, or yes or no? We aren't showcasing such matters, and at this point, I would say the opposition is doing quite a weak job at buttressing what the president's supposed to do. They seem to like the same old screen rhetoric, and the incumbent too are doing the same thing. They're kind of acting like they are not in governance, and they're acting like the opposition. So we rarely have ideological conversations in Nigeria about what we should actually be discussing. This rhetoric just starts up with somebody picks it up, and then you start, if you're going to employ somebody, is this how the person will come out? Is this what will happen? I for one, have never really thought that educational qualifications boost. I'm not saying there shouldn't be an educational qualification, but I'm saying that high educational qualifications do not necessarily boost leadership skills. And a very good example is Winston Churchill, who I think dropped out of high school and remains one of Britain's best prime ministers. There are many examples around the world. Even I'm sure, like a contestant like Peter Obi, who came out to the third class in university, would now be given an honorary degree in Harvard based on his business acumen, as he's been able to manage himself to become a billionaire. So, those questions and those rhetorics, I feel, are relevant. Right now, we have a serious problem in Nigeria. We're probably most disjointed as a united country right now based on politics. We've been having conversations which aren't real. So this certificate saga, as we keep flogging it, as courts have dealt with it, but in 2023, courts in Nigeria cleared this. I don't even know why we clear things in court and still go to another court, and keep going up to get to the Supreme. It's tiring. It's not the kind of conversation I think we should be having right now.
Well, I think we're now joined by Dr. Sam Amadi, who is the director of Abuja School and Social Political Thoughts. Dr. Amadi, thank you so much for joining us. Now, in terms of this certificate situation, what's your take on it? It's been going off and on. It keeps rising after, they've buried it. What do you have to say about this coming up again?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I think we have to clear two things. First, the issue is not whether you need to have a certificate to be qualified to lead. We know that many leaders across the world do not boast of very robust academic qualifications. Some do. Like in the past maybe 10 years, all the British prime ministers, 5-7 years, have gone to the famous Oxford and the famous PPE, Politics, Philosophy, and Economics degree. But we had Margaret Thatcher and John Major, who probably had diplomas or some other kind of lower certification. That's not the point here. And I agree that maybe even our constitution shouldn't even bother about education qualification. But the point is legality and due process. So if the constitution says this is a qualification, then you have to check for it. Number two, truth on oath. I think the way I look at Bola Tinubu's issue is that, of course, the Supreme Court was very, very remiss in the last election. Most of their rulings were bad. I can tell you that as a former law professor. But let's leave that as it is. The court did not determine. The court determine issues sometimes say it's unnecessary. It should have gone to trial. It should have gone to different courts. So there are several reasons in which the court did not pronounce that Tinubu had certificate or didn't have certificate. The court precludes that conversation based on some issues. Now, back to the real point here. My worry is, as I was a regulator for 5 years, if there's a filing before you, and the law says, okay, when the law says you have to have X to be qualified, and let's leave Bola Tinubu now. There is now a senator in Enugu State we hear who has finished primary 6. It doesn't add up. His law degree. These are the prudential check INEC should do. So if in 1999, Bola Ahmed Tinubu put in schools, this is evidence of record, said I went to primary school in X place, I went to secondary school in X place, and went to university. And in 2036, because of allegations that he never went to those schools, that he couldn't provide evidence of those schools, he now says 0, 0. The regulator, which is what INEC is, and I've said this in 2019, INEC is a regulator. INEC is not a printer of ballot boxes and no transitions. The regulator will say, provide explanation. In fact, this is common sense. Even you as a broadcasting channel, your MBS or your licensee, you provide evidence. They call you back and say something's missing. So it could be that Bola Ahmed Tinubu went to secondary school or primary school. It doesn't matter. He has enough experience, and the Constitution says, say, or this or that or that. So he is qualified to be president by virtue of or this or that or that, even if he didn't go to any school. Could it be counterfactual? There was fraud in his documentation that he doesn't want to put it in. Could it be counterfactual that, you know, the stories around him are true, and those maybe there's a name change somewhere, you know, arising for something? We need to know, and that's the point. So this is not about cooking Tinubu or Obi or anybody to anybody. This is not about who's qualified. He was a governor. I mean, nobody doubts whether this the president of Nigeria has a capacity to govern. Whether he's governing was a different argument. So sometimes public commentators should have rigor in making the case. The case here is that our institutions have been captured. They're not doing their work. The courts don't do their work. And it's not doing their work. In fact, the work might actually prove that Tinubu has everything right. But I will tell you as a lawyer and somebody who has taught administrative law and thankfully went to the best school where this is say.
Dr. Sam Amadi, I hope you can hear us. We are losing your connection. It seems to have gone off a bit there. If you'll please confirm if you're still there, we will come back to you. Okay, I hear you. We will come. Yes. We'll come back to you. But let me go back to Mr. Lawal. Mr. Lawal, I'm wondering, with all of this, we've seen this reoccur many times. When does it stop being legitimate investigation or queries into one's credentials? And when does it start being political persecution? Because this is about the third or fourth time that this has reoccurred. And how should INEC treat these cases when they're brought before them?
Well, I think Dr. Sam Amadi and myself agree on one critical thing, and I propose the solution. Now, if INEC does not have a pre-verification preceding elections, these are the situations we're always going to have. Dr. Sam Amadi clearly mentioned the senator who we're finding out somewhere in eastern Nigeria, who by calculation would have been 8 years old when I think 5 years old when he finished primary school. I can't remember. And there's just so many discrepancies. So the present failure we're seeing with the situation with the president and many other politicians in Nigeria is that INEC has no instituted pre-verification for certificates or anything. And like Dr. Sam Amadi explained, the question is not whether President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is qualified to govern. The question is, if this happened, what was his explanation? No explanation was given. So there are explanations where you can say, and it can happen to anybody. I can prove that I went to Chicago State University. Along the line, I lost my secondary school certificate. Here's the affidavit. I lost my primary school affidavit. I lost my primary school certificate. Here's the affidavit. I think this kind of conversations will put everything to bed. But because it hasn't been done, and I blame the regulator, let's be honest, I do not hold anybody responsible from this, apart from INEC, who has allowed people all get into various political offices with all this quagmire around. I think, and the solution, which I stated earlier, is that INEC needs to have a pre-election certificate verification system, which allows.
Kunle, are you still there?
Oh, we're having issues with our connection today. I hope Dr. Sam Amadi is back with us. He isn't. Okay, Dr. Sam Amadi, are you with us?
But I think they have disabled my video. But I can hear
we can hear you now.
We hear
now,
you now.
Dr. Amadi, in terms of this situation, basically what you said earlier is transparency, as in coming out to say this is what has happened so far. Would you say that this situation now could influence, voters' perception in terms of our political campaigns ahead of general elections?
Well, it can if campaigners spread the right message. So if they say, look, what is President Tinubu hiding? Why can't he be consistent on a simple thing like primary school? I mean, like Kunle said, I lost my certificate. The availability of certificate does not, invalidate the entry. So I went to primary school somewhere in Abakaliki. I can say I went to this Abu Ghobal primary school in Abakaliki. It's so year. I don't have the certificate. In fact, there are many certificates I don't have again because probably I was not very diligent or careful or something happened. So this can become a political messaging issue, depending on two things. One, many of the voters are already captive voters. They are voting on ethnic line, religious line, or partisan line, or they procure their principals, their brothers and sisters who are in government. So those will not be affected. They don't care. Many voters also, some voters will think that Tinubu has done well, we should give a second chance. They probably will not be affected as well. But there are voters who really are on the borderline. And in many developed democracies, those are the voters that called the swing voters. They are not pledged, partisan. They are just looking at the candidates. So, you know what? Would I trust somebody who can even disclose his primary school? Who put somewhere something else somewhere and it's not put it together? I mean, a reasonable explanation for why in 1999 you could say I went to X schools and can't say so is that I'm something about that. So that voter will say, look, I don't think I trust a president whose ideology is subject to such, confusion and misrepresentation or fraud. Again, it depends on what kind of voter you are. Conscientious voters who are independent-minded, voters who are scrutinizing candidates and asking key questions, or voters who pledge their vote because of external circumstances, their ethnicity, religion, social class, or relationship. So this can play big in an election, depending on two factors here. We always forget that Nigerian elections are yet to become credible in a real sense that votes, the shift in voter perception reflects a result. I've not seen that in the last two elections. I think that we are still working hard on creating voter integrity platform and, of course, educated voter where the media, the public commentators help to focus on the issues that should matter to voters: competence, character, policy. So if those issues are together, then you could see that this could cause vote loss for the president. But the bigger question is the Nigerian regulatory institutions, how they work. I mean, INEC, I've seen for over elections. Why can't INEC do basics? Set up a system. You're a regulator. And then senior lawyers confuse them. I to senior advocates who don't even have clue about administrative law, really, apart from studying. They don't even know that INEC is a regulator. They don't even know that every right to make decisions with judicial. Go to passport office to go and get a passport, and you go and bring to them age declaration that is written with hand. The signature is upside down. They know that this is fake, and you're supposed to be 18 or thereabout to have a passport. Are they going to say, and they look at you don't even look 18. They say, well, there's a paper here called age declaration. We take it, even though it was sworn in a magistrate court in Honolulu. They are going to say, no, you don't have the qualification. That's elementary. Every regulator, if you go to FRS to ask for a license, and your age shows that you are actually 12 years, they're not going to give you because you said that you are 18, but the certificate you attach is discrepant with what you have said. They will deny you. The same way INEC is a regulator. You can't file something on INEC and say, I have a WAEC, and what you file shows that you don't have anything. Or INEC knows that school ceased to exist in 1920 on public record, but you graduated in 2004 in that. Or INEC knows that by 2004 you're already a senator. You could have gone to school and you said you passed primary school 6. These are things that INEC will say, no, you're not qualified. Then you will now go to court. So people say, INEC, do nothing. Oh, let them go to court. How can that be? And that's why we're creating too many cases in court, cases that INEC should handle. Then if people feel too assured, they can then go to court and sue INEC. Not INEC to wait and say, you people go to court. It's terrible. I've been saying this for years, but nobody in INEC seems to have an ear to do the right thing.
Well, Kunle, now, what would you say, the end of this situation will be? Would it be that we need to have another court dismissal, or the president have to come out with, the original document and say, you know what, this is it for this situation to stop, being buried and resurrecting itself a few years later? What do you think it will look like?
So that will be determined by quite a few things. First and foremost, it will be determined by the president's will to come out openly to Nigerians. And, that to be integrity and character. The president decides and says, look, this was what happened. This was what happened. Let's have this conversation. I think that's what a leader should do. Now, the president, being the president of Nigeria, might not do that. Secondly, it is inevitable that INEC has failed in certificate. That's finding out about certificates or authenticating certificates. INEC has totally failed on that, and INEC should either find a system to do that, or INEC is totally comfortable, or how would I call it, complicit, because it's not only the case of the president. It goes downline. It goes fully downline, and there are multiple cases of these issues. So, two things must come into place. If the president chooses integrity, and I feel if the president doesn't choose integrity, it's up to Nigerians to say, do we want this quality in our president, or we don't want this quality in our president? And then voters should act how they choose to act as regards those two. So like I said, verification by INEC, which is key too. Then thirdly, I think the kind of conversations we're having around this should be solution-driven. It shouldn't be, he doesn't have a certificate. He doesn't have a certificate. There's this guy in Senate that doesn't have a certificate. There's this guy in House of Rep. Those are not, it doesn't take a nation forward. Okay, INEC, you failed at social points. INEC, come to the conversation. These are people from the CSOs. These are people from the apprentices, and say, look, this system cannot work like this again. You have to have a department that verifies. And if that department does not verify, and if there are no explanations, like I think generally, because let's say you're using the president as an example, if the president has served as a governor already, it is more than qualification to run for president, whether he went to school or not. Let's just be honest, because we shouldn't have even allowed him to run for governor if we felt in the beginning that was the problem. But because we have allowed that, we are now caught up with a bigger quagmire as he's serving for president, because there's no way, even in America, that you've served as a governor, you'll be allowed to run for president. So I think those are the few issues we'll have to look over.
Absolutely correct. INEC should have its own independent verification system. This will just save us all the problems. But we do know one thing, that of course he does have a skill set. And once he has a skill set, he can run for president. I think that's okay for me. Thank you very much, Mr. Lawal. Thank you very much, Dr. Amadi, for joining us to have this conversation. Our last one for Breakfast Extra. We'll continue to, well, hopefully we're not met with this conversation again. But of course, we'll continue to come to you for other conversations that come up. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.